Parents who have disowned or genuinely stopped loving your child. What happened? Drugs, violence, theft, repetitively trying to destroy his younger brother, becoming a danger to myself and others, mental health issues that he refuses to deal with any longer or take his meds for anymore. Just plain off the chain behavior that was too much for all of us. I wouldn't call it disowning as much as putting down boundaries and setting up fences to protect people who don't deserve his treatment. He also tends to be very manipulative and leans toward narcissistic behavior, in that he will habitually lie about you to others and try to play the victim. This can be very damaging to relationships with people that don't understand what's going on, so I'd rather just not bring myself into the equation anymore, because it's too costly and it's not worth it. He lacks empathy and doesn't know how to stop himself from his harmful behavior due to a developmental disability, although he will also admit that he knows what he's doing, and he knows that he is manipulative and playing games at times. When he was younger and was under the rules, or being a minor, then he had all the help in the world, and it was easier to deal with. My siblings and I have stopped interacting with my oldest brother. We found out that years earlier he had molested at least 2 boys. He was an adult at the time. He showed no remorse and turned the story around to say that those boys were at fault. It was so disgusting to watch someone you grew up with treat people so poorly and show such a blatant disregard for others. The good news is that the remaining 4 siblings have become closer, and we now are able to appreciate the good we see in each other. It's true when they say that if you could pick your family it would look much different than it is. Other way round. My father had this incredible stupid as a wife. She is just terrible. She left him, owed me quite a bit of money, cheated on my father, and on and on. After 3 years of marriage, she is around 36 and my father is 50. He did everything for her, and she just made him miserable, but he kept going. When she left my father he became really depressed, and I cared for him, hoping that he would get over the whole situation etc. We even fought the whole divorce together. He got better and everything. I was really happy for him. Then came the day that she had no money left, and she came back to my father. He told me about it, and I was so angry that he didn't learn from the story before. I told him that I don't want to see her ever again, and I won't do anything with him if she there as well. The day came when my father and I wanted to meet for lunch. As I arrived I saw her sitting there with him. I went to the place and said that she had to leave or I'm gonna leave. He became mad at for that and I left. He tried to do the same move again. I told him to off and never spoke to him again. Never trusted this woman. It became better, and then I found out about her cheating, lying and everything. She told me to off when I wanted my money back. I won't trust her ever again, but I can't help my dad. I told him everything, and he is still blind through those love curtains. My parents didn't disown me. I was just a weird mistake. My mother never wanted a child. She bailed after a few months. My father was a single parent and ended up in prison, life without parole, when I was 14. I finally met my mother. She was a police detective by the time I moved in with her. She threw me out after 2 months. I'm 30 now, and life is typically a little weird around the holidays, but I always get a good laugh when I tell people that my father is in prison for life and my mother is a cop. But then they get super awkward when I tell them that no, it's not a joke. It took a long time for me to come to terms with it, but I know now that none of it was my fault. Edit. This blew up way more than I expected. Thanks for all the kind words, everybody. Since my mom doesn't have Reddit, and I don't care if my sister does, I will speak for her. My sister is the worst person I know. Worse than my ex-fiancé who cheated on me, lied to me, then tried to make it my fault because I'm in the Navy and across country. She's a drug addict, narcissistic, drunk, and abusive. The worst traits of her abusive ex-stepfather. She may or may not be carrying the tradition in my family of teenage pregnancy. No one in my family talks to her, so I can't confirm it, but I don't doubt it. She blames my mother for everything bad that had happened to her. Claims I molested when we were 9 or 10. She claims I planned to res***xual that happened to her, etc etc. She cannot be any more different from me and my siblings, and cannot stand that me and my brother are no longer traumatized by our childhood. She has blocked 90% of my family and no one misses her. My parents got divorced, and my mother decided she didn't want to be a mother anymore, so she neglected my sibling and I and kicked us out of her house. Because the court system favors the mother, she got custody despite nobody asking us or looking too far into it, and my dad had to give her the house and child support. Despite this, she didn't do anything for us, and we ended up living with him anyways, and she spent our child support on world travels and wouldn't ever buy us anything. She met a guy, sponsored him, he had a son and that became her son. I was now nothing to her. They divorced, he stole all her money and she ended up homeless until family took her in, and it's been shaky since. She went off the deep end about a year ago, and I tried to get involved to help her, but she kept being demeaning and went crazy, got arrested and I cut off ties. She threatened to come shoot me, and I called the police and even went to try and make a police report but nobody would listen to me, and the guy at the counter at the police station laughed at me. It was very bizarre. Cliché not me but my mum got taken out of my grandparents' will, and she only got to know so because of her sister. Her side of the family has always been very conservative and rather communal, so till death do us apart is serious business with them. When she ran away for over a week without giving any notice, leaving me and my sister alone, only to come back with some stranger we couldn't tell anyone they were living with us. It was obvious things were about to get hairy. She divorced and remarried in the span of about 6 months, trying to keep everyone in the family out of the loop. I wouldn't be surprised if someone learned about it through the invitation to the party. Cries and drama ensured that day. She wasn't invited to the Christmas family reunion, and she used me and my sister as bargaining chips. They took away from her anything that was still in their name. She moved away, and only recently has she been trying to connect back. I'm not sure if this counts. I didn't disown him, but went through a dissociative episode after some really intense trauma, and I honestly couldn't feel any attachment and parental love that I had for my son. I tried not to show it and behave as normally as possible because he was a child at the time and couldn't possibly understand what I was going through. It was pretty disturbing to not be able to feel any sense of bond with him. I eventually got better, but I definitely did not feel what I or most people would call love for him. Not me. Friend wanted to move out and be independent, which was appropriate because she was 22. Her parents wanted to keep her under their thumb and told her she couldn't move out. A huge argument ensued. She grabbed all her stuff and left, and was promptly disowned by both parents. Makes sense, right? I've disowned one of my siblings. Still have 5 other siblings. My sister is just a horrible person. She's the youngest of the 7, and she's been rotten since she was a teenager. She is much younger than the rest of us, so while the other 6 grew up together, she was almost like an only child. She treats everybody in her life like they're here to serve her needs. Some of the things she's put our mother through are truly horrible. I wouldn't give her if she disappeared forever. Not me, but my great-grandma. This story is really sad but also interesting, so thought I'd share it. She was a young Creole teenager. French Creole was her first language, and she was a quarter to half black like me, with tan skin and loose brown curls. She was born in Florida, but when things started getting worse for black people in Florida, her family relocated to Texas. For those who don't know, Creole people tend to play heavily into colorism. Although they are definitely mixed race, they prioritize light-skinned people. The looser your curl, the lighter your skin, the more white you look, the better. Her parents had high expectations for her to marry a wealthy, light-skinned man who would take care of her. Instead, she met my great-grandfather, a poor, dark-skinned man jumping from job to job working for farmers and trying to make a living. The two of them fell in love. They were just teenagers. Her parents threatened to disown her if she continued seeing him, and like a rebellious teenager, she refused. They wanted her to do better. She wanted to be in love. They might have broken up eventually if she didn't get pregnant. But she did, and that was the end of it. Her parents basically said, "You've ruined your life," and disowned her right there. The whole family disowned her. No one would speak to her aunts, uncles, cousins, not a single person stood up for her. So she had no choice. The two of them moved to California so he could get a job picking oranges. He built a house. They had their first daughter. She was 16. She never saw her family again. Do adopted kids count? We adopted a 3-year-old from foster care. Cutest, sweetest kid. He had a few issues, but we mostly figured it was because of his history. The issues escalated quickly. When he was 7, he hit our dog with a golf club. We had to keep him away from our dog and our cat. The cat disappeared. We assumed she got out and ran away. Found out years later that he killed it and threw it in the woods. The last straw was when he burned our home down. We sent him to a residential treatment center where he stayed for 2 years. During that time, he molested a roommate and became extremely violent. The insurance company told us that they wouldn't pay anymore and we'd either have to pay for him out of pocket, $40K a month, or bring him home. We have younger children and it wouldn't be safe. We ended up telling the state we wouldn't bring him home, so now we have a verified abuse report against us because we wouldn't bring him back, even though the therapists agreed with our decision. I don't love him. I wish the best for him, but I don't feel anything toward him. Okay, so far everyone is disowning their parents, but no parents disowning / no longer loving their children. Interesting. Because it's a younger demographic, or do parents not want to talk about it? I'd love to hear my mother's explanation, although she hasn't contacted me for over 20 years, so I know that's not going to happen. I think you're more likely to get responses from the kids. Since it seems to have widened a bit, a family torn apart, based on an aunt and her niece. Aunt starts signs of dementia at a relatively young age, is moved into an assisted living home. Niece, who bounces around jobs, gets hire ex to go visit her about once a week. Take her out to the mall or a walk in the park, whatever. Paid handsomely. We get an alert that aunt has a check bounce from her account that should have $5K in it. Niece has drained the account. Proven beyond a doubt, with receipts. Niece would take aunt to aunt's bank machine every Friday and withdraw $200, then fill her car with gas. Aunt can't drive and charge us hours when she clearly didn't spend hours with aunt. Charged us claiming she took aunt to appointments. There was no appointment. We can actually call the doctor, FYI. The family rift? For some bizarre reason niece's family took her side. Not a parent, but my parents stopped loving me the moment I was disfellowshipped as a Jehovah's Witness, and I was promptly kicked out. I knew nothing of how to live on my own at the time, but I had a decent job and survived. My brother stopped associating with them 2 years later, and lives with me, and they since moved away, 1,500 miles away to be exact. It's easier to tell people I'm orphan, or that I do not have parents, cause it's hard to explain how they would stop loving, or want to associate with their own son over some stupid cult rules. My father said my mother's issue was she had too many children, and it gave her some kind of brain fever, much like a dog that loses its mind after having too many puppies. My mother said my father felt trapped by me. He was planning to leave when it was just my 2 older brother, and then my mother got pregnant with me, and he felt obligated to stay. Now that I'm an adult with 2 kids myself, I think realized that both of my parents are just extremely mentally ill and incapably of loving anyone, including themselves. Not my story, but in a similar thread to this one, asking parents about when they realized they raised a monster. Someone linked to this post. TLIDR of that post, the son was a teen, but took it way further by eventually raping his own mother, who committed suicide a year after. I wouldn't say I've disowned or stopped loving my son, but it's real tough to find love for him. He's almost 14 next month, and he's currently out of our home at a treatment facility. He's averaged 2 arrests a year for the last 2 years, and he's attacked my wife several times, our daughter several times, and the neighborhood kids several times. He's run away from school, run away from home, and tried to push me off the roof of our house after threatening to jump off and hurt himself. We have become that family in our town where the police are called to our home on a semi-regular basis. He's been getting more violent as he gets older, not to mention bigger and stronger, and I honestly don't see an end in sight. The key fact I'm leaving out is that he's been diagnosed as high-functioning autistic and is also bipolar. That's like putting walls around a tornado and expecting it to stay inside the walls. A lot of what has occurred he had little control over because of the way his mind is, where he's constantly at war with himself, structure versus chaos, and my wife and I have tried desperately to give him the best life we can while keeping ourselves and our daughters safe, but *I*am tired. It's been 8.5 years we've been going through this with him, and I've been ready to throw in the towel on him for a while. But my wife refuses to let him go, so we wake up every morning trying to give him the best life for him and our girls. I disowned a family member, not a child though. We were very close, until he ended up being caught in a pedo sting. Then I turned my back, and haven't looked back. I have a sister the age of the girl he was supposed to meet. I can't associate with scum like that. Phil, according to my sister, nothing was ever done to her. My parents disowned my oldest sister. She always struggled growing up more than us. She became a teen mom with a bad older dude, partied a lot, etc. But my parents helped her a lot. They do okay for themselves, but had a no co-signing rule for all 6 of my siblings and L. Still, they co-signed for her house, so she could get a head start. She didn't pay the mortgage for almost 3 years before my mom got served in front of all the other nurses at her work. My parents worked tirelessly to try to work out deals where my sister and her family kept the house and got some leniency, but to no avail because my sister never showed up for court dates. During this time, she paid $12K for IVF and got pregnant with her 5th kid. When my mom demanded some of the money back, she accused my dad and my brother of beating her sons. When my parents took them to Disney World, he didn't, and said she'd file a police report if he asked for money again. They kept asking, cause it wasn't true. She awkwardly joined us for Christmas and punched my brother in the face during the meal for humiliating her oldest son by asking him if he wanted to work at my brother's company for good pay. Her oldest son is in and out of jail, and my brother was trying to help him after his release, but her son said he didn't want a job and got mad. She then called the cops and told them the same brother had illegal guns in his truck, and they came on Christmas night and searched his truck. No guns found. Needless to say, she is not welcome anywhere near any of us, and my mom still cries about it, but refuses to talk to her again. As Jehovah's Witnesses, my parents disowned my siblings and I several times since I was in my late teens. One of the JW rules is that you do not associate with others who know the truth, but refuse to follow it, including family, and parents are encouraged to disown any children who have left the religion. The first time was when I was 19. It upset me. I was heartbroken, and eventually they changed their minds, only to do it again a couple years later, and so on until I stopped caring and no longer attempt to be a part of their lives at all. A little different. I was disowned, but I deserved it. I was an addict and a mess for a long time. My mom couldn't keep bailing me out of trouble and watch me self-destruct anymore. I wasn't living at home. She came to see me one last time to tell me she was done, not to contact her. She would no longer have anything to do with me. She was in pieces. I can't imagine how hard it must have been for her. But it was the best thing she ever did for me. Once she cut me off, my rock bottom came hard and fast. After a little while of living on the streets and my addiction consuming me, I made my way to a detox center, got a few days clean under my belt, and never looked back. That was almost 15 years ago. After I was clean a little while, I contacted my mom, and little by little we built a relationship again, and now we are really close. I'm forever grateful to my mom for letting me fall and letting me back into her life. My biological father divorced my mom and also his 3 kids, basically bouncing out of our lives and making it clear he wanted next to nothing to do with any of us when he left. Man, years later, at my older sister's funeral that he had the gall to attend, I asked him why he did that. He said, "I thought it would be easier for everyone." He actually meant it was easier for him to run home to his wealthy family and enjoy a second adolescence, while my single mother worked 2 jobs to feed 3 kids under 10 with 0 child support from him. My mother and her sister were both adopted into a great family. Recently, my grandfather fell ill and we were told to prepare to say goodbye. So the family gathered. My grandmother has had a hard time with her memory since she had a brain hemorrhage, but she welcomed my aunt into her home during this tough time. Whilst my grandfather was in his final week, Wendy, aunt, took my grandmother's ATM card and proceeded to spend well over $1,000 on herself and get herself a motel room. She also attempted to steal their car. When my uncles found out, she basically disappeared into the wind. After my grandfather passed and his funeral was all sorted, my grandmother went to an attorney to write Wendy out of any inheritance she would get from their estate when she passes. She didn't press any formal charges because the whole process would have been lengthy and more painful for her. She didn't need the extra stress. I'm pretty sure one of my uncles also threatened Wendy to make sure she stayed away from my grandmother from now on too. I have disowned my oldest son. He molested my daughter, has been diagnosed as a sociopath and we have restraining orders against him. It isn't fun, and I never thought I would be that parent. I have been legally disowned by my father. When I was 11, my mum was diagnosed with terminal cancer. This was her second diagnosis in around 4 years. Obviously she recovered the first time after intense surgery and a lot of chemo, and he did not want to look after her like he did before. He also had a new GF and her family to look after apparently, and he had no issues leaving us. When my mum passed away, when I was 14, my brother, grandmother, him and I met up to discuss who I was going to live with. The plan was my brother and his family. Father was never considered, and he showed up and declared that he was in the process of going to court to legally emancipate himself from me. He went out of his way to legally declare that I was no longer his child, just so that my brother, 22-year with a wife and 2 young children already struggling on 1 paycheck, could seek child support. Needless to say it stung coming only days after my mother's funeral.